All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Minnesota Arts Town Hall. My name is Kathy Muchapa. I'm the Executive Director with the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council located in St. Paul. And I will be co-moderating today with my colleague and friend, Drew.
Good afternoon. My name is Drew Digby. I'm the Executive Director of the Arrowhead Regional Arts Council and the current President of the Forum of Regional Arts Councils. Together, we are hosting this town hall. You should know that representatives of many agencies and organizations are here listening as well. They include the Forum of Regional Arts Councils of Minnesota, the Minnesota State Arts Board, the Minnesota Presenters Network, Arts Midwest, Springboard for the Arts, Minnesota Theater Alliance, the City of Minneapolis Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, and Minnesota Citizens for the Arts. In addition, many other arts funders are signed up and listening. Before we get going, I wanted to do a land acknowledgement. The land I speak from is historically land of the Ojibwe people. As an individual and a representative of my organization, we are currently working to better understand the specific history that has brought us to this place and time. For that reason, I've been researching the tract of land that I live on. I know that it was included in the Treaty of 1854. My property is part of a piece of land that white settlers took from the Ojibwe owners shortly after this treaty, violating the treaty's terms from the very beginning. I also know that the community I live in has often been a place of refuge and hope for Black Americans, but history also shows that the promise of refuge and hope has been tragically crushed many times. I'm still learning and working to challenge the inequities that still exist. Let me go over the mechanics of today's town hall. We have many people signed up to speak. We may have time for others to speak. If you would like to do so, use the raise your hand function and we will take note. I would encourage you to keep yourself on mute during this so that we can all hear one another. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. We have a timekeeper who will mute speakers who go over that time. We strongly encourage you to use the chat function to make comments, to add to what's already been said, to have any kind of discussion and sharing resources. We will monitor that and share it with as many people as possible afterwards. We know all of you have a lot more to say. They will be shared with all the sponsors. Many of them are planning a follow-up email to answer questions and to respond to what is said today. Now let me ask Kathy to talk about the content and context. Kathy?
Okay. So before we get started, I want to ground us in today's purpose and intent. We've asked you here so that we can listen to you about your vision and ideas for the future of Minnesota's arts and culture community. We spent the last several weeks hearing stories about lost opportunities and income, making it hard to pay for food and rent, about the impact of isolation on mental health, and the fear of what is ahead if this continues. We're all experiencing some level of trauma, and it's going to take some time for recovery. We believe that the road to recovery will require creative thinking to imagine a post-pandemic reality that isn't just about going back to the way things were. And we know that this community is made up of the most creative minds in the state, and we want to hear your vision ideas for how to move forward. Even in all of the uncertainty that surrounds us now, we are certain that all of you are integral to the economic, social, and cultural health and wellness of the state, and we are committed to supporting you as best we can. I also want to note that there is a closed caption option at the bottom bar in case that would be helpful for you throughout the session. So for today's town hall, we'd like to suggest the following norms for how to be on this Zoom together. Please assume best intentions, listen for understanding, acknowledge that we all have some privilege and that we all make mistakes, recognize the space that we take up and or hold because of this privilege, respect each other's opinions and experiences, speak honestly from your own experience, please exercise self-care, appreciate the silence and processing time. Zooming is becoming a daily activity for many of us, and there are still glitches, and so please be patient with that as well. And definitely bring kindness. So with that, Drew and I will take turns calling speakers. What we'll do is we'll call the next speaker and then the speaker that's on deck. When you hear your name, please be prepared to unmute yourself to speak. So we'll get right into the town hall. Our first speaker for today is Kevin Strauss from Rochester, from Storyteller, and then on deck will be Patrick Scully from Minneapolis. So Kevin, you're up.
Hi, I have three things I'd like to share with everyone on the call. I'm pretty lucky because I think compared to a lot of my friends who are performers, there are three things that I think we really need to pay attention to in this kind of a crisis. The first one is individual artists don't have access to the PPP, the federal program, or state unemployment funding in reasonable ways. So it seems like artists are impacted individually. The way arts organizations a lot of arts organizations and nonprofits have been able to access the federal PPP, which is great for them. But please realize individual artists don't have that access. The second point is it'd be great if arts funding, as it's being reorganized in the state, maybe look for a way to create kind of an independent artist PPP program where artists could, submit their tax returns to demonstrate that they're working artists, that they make their income through their art, and show how much that is, and then use that as a way for them to demonstrate that they should be able to get a paycheck protection sort of benefit from the system. Right now, the federal and state governments aren't able to work that out. It's so odd to provide unemployment for independent professionals that's something that's falling through the cracks. And the third point I'd like to make is another great opportunity here is we have lots of artists that are performers that are having trouble performing because obviously we're not in place with other people. And so, one great way that arts funding organizations could provide resources and keep the arts vibrant in Minnesota is if they were able to provide funding for either equipment or training so that performing artists, I know I'm not addressing issues for non-performing artists, but so performing artists could learn how to do Zoom performance so they could get equipment that they need for lighting and backdrops, and so that they could be ready to perform remotely for schools and libraries and community centers. So that's what I'd like to share.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker is Patrick Scully from Minneapolis, and then on deck is Heidi Jeub from St. Joseph.
Thank you, Kathy. Dear funders, let's turn this crisis into an opportunity for sustainability. In current best practices, you provide stable, ongoing support to arts organizations. Expand this to individual artists. Develop programs that provide individual artists access to stable, ongoing funds to support our work. So today, having received an Artist Initiative grant, I have to wait 5 years to apply again. Same with the McKnight Foundation. And then it got worse. 20 days ago, an Arts Board email informed me that all the work I did in late 2019 and early 2020 to prepare applications to Arts Board's touring and education programs, it had the rug pulled out from underneath it. Individual artists are the topsoil of our arts ecosystem. Without attention to the topsoil, eventually the whole ecosystem fails. Without us, theaters have no playwrights, museums and galleries have no objects, musicians have no composers, and bookshelves are empty. It's time to create programs that help individual artists plan sustainable lives, to thrive, not just limp along. How? Well, the AIDS epidemic taught us that good policy requires the particular input of those most impacted. Individual artists need real seat-at-the-table input now. Even with shared values, the perspective of arts administrators is of necessity different from the perspective of individual artists. I know, I've worn both of these hats. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Our next speaker is Heidi Jeub from St. Joseph, and then on deck is James Gambone from Orono.
Thanks for this opportunity to speak. I'm in St. Joseph, Minnesota. I'm very much integrated into rural Minnesota and programming that is often seen through a variety of different venues that does not include large organizations. I see, theater events that are happening at schools, not necessarily through a theater organization, for instance. And so there's a lot of things culturally that's happening that's not on the state, it's not seen from the state perspective. That being said, I actually also like to look at small bite-sized options for everyone because a little adds up to a lot. I did actually raise my kids and start my art career during the recession. So that means I didn't have a market. However, I did have an opportunity to just work on my own skill set. So what I'm going to actually suggest is that we start doing some of these sort of more bite-sized type projects, mentoring relationships between artists with different skill sets, for instance. Maybe looking at diversity of income streams for artists. So if our market, say, in selling our art isn't there, what are some other things that we could be doing with our talents? And also, I totally go with what Patrick was saying in a lot of senses, because I actually do think that vision-based type projects might be more than just a really isolated period of time. It might be 3 or 4 years down the road. So I would love to be able to state my vision, as well as look at the little steps that I need to succeed in that vision. So I'm sure there's a lot of other artists out there who want to do the same thing.
Thank you, Heidi. Up next is James Gambone from Orono, and then on deck is Mankwe Ndosi from Minneapolis.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really nice to have a forum like this, so thank you very much for offering this opportunity. I sort of have an unusual background. I'm a public health professional. I teach graduate level in public health, so obviously what's going on is very important to me. And also for the past 30 years, I've been a film, television, radio, and theater writer, producer, and director. And so I bring those two things together as part of my work. So one of the things I want to recommend is I think that if we're smart as an arts community, we will form a recovery group that will be made up of individual artists from different areas that are being affected by this particular 19. Also include public health people and professionals, and I certainly would be more than happy to serve on such a group, and maybe that could get some support from the funders who are listening, that we form a recovery group that starts planning for recovery. And let me give you an example of how that works. I have a theater production that's already been funded. It's scheduled for October 29th through November 1st at History Theater, and it's celebrating the 100th anniversary of Sinclair Lewis's writing of Main Street. So obviously I have to wait until June 26th now to decide whether the History Theater is going to have a fall schedule or not. So what I've done in the meantime as a public health professional, I thought, okay, let's look at the countries that are already months ahead of us. So I've contacted Ireland, theaters in Ireland, theaters in Germany, theaters in South Korea, and theaters in Italy to find out what they're planning on doing for setting up guidelines, for example, for live performances. And that information, I just sent that out last Saturday, so I'm not expecting quick returns since all of those countries are in different stages, but they are way ahead of us in terms of they'll have live theater before we will and live performances before we will. So that's something that this kind of a group that I'm suggesting that could be formed and supported, could be making those kind of plans, supporting that kind of research so that we can be ready, and it's not trying to get everything together once guidelines are set up by the federal government. We're smart enough to do our own guidelines as an arts community, and we have the public.
All right, sorry, James. Please, if you have additional comments, please use the chat also. We hate cutting folks off, but that we're trying to make sure that everybody has a chance to talk. So thank you, James, for your comments and for that information. Up next, we have Mankwe Ndosi from Minneapolis, and then on deck, we have Kathy Weinberg from Dodson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kathy, and everyone else who's been part of this. I also want to echo and say yes to Patrick Scully's conversation about using this as a time to think about stepping forward and moving forward and not making this an opportunity for us to think about just going backwards to reconstruct what has been before. There's a lot of our individual artists for whom the system as it is has never worked. And so it's upon us to take this opportunity to, as you know, to listen and to find ways for us to move forward with just changes in systems, structures and strategies that can help connect up rural and urban artists, again, that look at Indigenous, Black, and POC artists, and artists in rural and tribal nations. It's an opportunity for us as individual artists to also look around at our neighborhoods if we're not as invested in our neighborhoods, and look at heritages and ancestral lineages of the way that art and creativity has been embedded into everyday life and not just separated into institutions that are outside of or external from daily life opportunities and structures. You know, again, integrating into our daily life, and as well as looking at funding, being able to think of what has happened in terms of structures, organizations, philanthropic, as not being the only way it is, the way it's always going to be, the way it has to be. In fact, so much of the philanthropic money that we get is basically crumbs that have to do with tax shelters for foundations. And I think this is a perfect time to push back on that, meaning that in order for artists and arts to survive, we need to push back on the idea that only 5 to 11% of foundational funding actually is meted out to recipients.
Thank you, Mankwe. And again, if you have any additional comments, just put them in the chat. Also a reminder to folks that if you are interested in speaking, if you've been inspired or if there are things that are coming to mind now, please use the raise hand feature so that we can track that and add you to the list. Up next is Kathy Weinberg from Lutsen.
Good afternoon, Kathy Weinberg from the North Shore of Lake Superior up here in Cook County. I'm both an artist, but I also am a founder of the North Shore Artists League. So we're about 50 members and about 1 year into our existence. I did get one of the financial relief grants and quickly took a pro Zoom so that our meetings could continue on Zoom and our steering committee. So I'm very thankful for that. Our market here is very tourist dependent. Obviously things have been canceling, like the art festival. The Grand Marais Art Colony is struggling seriously with even its existence, which has been in existence since 1937. So we are all concerned about that and working hard to support them. Events like this require a pivot, and one of the things I have been very impressed by is how quickly both ARAC and the Springboard for the Arts have done that pivot and reached out and have gotten help out to artists. So I really thank you for that, and impressed that you were able to do that so quickly. And I think therein lies the challenge for all of us, is how do we pivot, but how do we do it quickly and enough to assure sustainability and existence, actually. And so in our steering committee, we are really recognizing the need for strength of expertise. We need to get all of us online. We need to replace our on-the-ground events with virtual events, but the knowledge and skill sets to do that are not as readily available here as they might be in urban areas or whatever. So that is kind of one of the missions I'm on now, is struggling to find that expertise to try to help.
Kathy, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments, and please continue them on the chat. We really have been looking at that. Taking over now, I'll do the next 6. First up will be Shane Anderson of Apple Valley, followed by Liz Dodson of Minneapolis. And I just would remind you, if you want to speak, please use the raise your hand function. There may be a chance if we see it in the chat, but that may be difficult because it's going pretty quickly. So now, Shane Anderson from Apple Valley. Okay, I can't find Shane. So how about Liz Dodson from Minneapolis, be followed by Susanne Crane from Albert Lee.
Okay. Tried to get it to unmute. Can you get me to unmute?
We can hear you, Liz.
Okay. All right. Well, yesterday I was on the town hall and speaking about the organization that I belong to as an artist, which is the IAFA, which is the International Association of Female Artists. It's an organization that's been founded recently for artists, female artists. And we, at this particular time, are trying to combine our art skills with our empathy toward this, toward a local nursing home in this pandemic, the wide pandemic time. And so our thoughts were to try to locate a local nursing home where most of the deaths occur at this time and see if we as artists, maybe for a small fee, could help with artist healing and maybe make a themed course for the seniors there of drawing and painting at this particular time that should be a calming influence to them. And it could be a themed exhibition that they would have once a month from the work that they produce. So it would mean contacting a local nursing home or some confined community. And there are many artists throughout the states, and maybe it could even have some funding from the states, such as the WPA used to do when that was a very depressed time and the depression, so that maybe this could take hold. And
thank you, Liz. Sorry we had to cut you off there. But feel free to continue your comments in the chat. Next up will be Susanne Crane from Albert Lee, and she'll be followed by Soon Mi Chomei from St. Paul. Suzanne?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, and thank you everyone for your hard work. Okay, I don't usually do this, so it's a little bit intimidating. I'm Susanne Crane, I'm an artist educator, and I moved from Minneapolis to rural Minnesota to save a century-old opera palace and create opportunities for artists here. Pre-COVID, I made 100% of my revenue from different streams, artistic pursuits, helping run a local arts nonprofit, teaching private lessons, having an after-school enrichment program for kids, and renting out artist studios. And since the shelter in, my income went to zero. So I'd like to reach out to the funders and say that there are long-term effects of this that they're daunting. I have no idea. But I'd also like to say that I'm very grateful to Springboard for sending out some money that kept the lights and the heat on. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks very much. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next up will be Sunmi Chomei from St. Paul, to be followed by Caroline Mannheimer. Sunmi?
Hi, thank you. I'm a freelance actor and artist, and I just kind of want to piggyback on the last speaker as well as what Patrick Scully said. You know, a lot of artists, especially, are just falling through the cracks as far as what's available. Again, I want to commend Springboard for understanding the urgency of helping artists within the first week. And the $500 helped me pay my rent. But I was also let go by a theater that claimed an act of God clause that allowed them to pay 3 days of 1 week for our entire 11-week contract. And the way that artists are falling through the cracks that the funders on this call can help is, for example, the Bridge Fund in St. Paul allows for a $1,000 stipend for a family of 4 that makes a total of $40,000. Well, a lot of artists are single. A lot of artists, you know, we fall above the poverty line of $12,060 per year, but we're below qualifying for things like SNAP, and a lot of us haven't had unemployment approved yet. I mean, I have a friend who was approved for $100 a week, and the $600 is going to help, but it's going to run out. And then we don't qualify for the Bridge Fund in St. Paul for the small businesses, even though for independent contractors, because we don't have retail business. So I just want to, you know, really emphasize the urgency for folks like the Minnesota State Arts Board to make funding available. Like I'm not working in a hospital or grocery store, and the state touts how much they believe in their artists. Well, I don't feel essential right now. I feel disposable. And I mean, I really commend MRAC and Springboard.
Thank you. Sorry you hit your time limit. And I'll just remind everyone to keep the comments coming in the chat. I think a lot of people are very interested in looking at what's there. Next up will be Caroline Mannheimer of Minneapolis, followed by Joko Sutrisno from St. Paul. Caroline? Wait, is Caroline there? She's first and then you, Joko. Let's see. Well, actually, I don't see Caroline, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My peace, health, safety, and joy be upon of us. I have 2 points to say. Number one, due to the COVID-19, individual artists who work as a freelance or individual contractor, self-employed, have the biggest impact. Many performances, residencies program has been canceled. Furthermore, the Minnesota State Art Board has suspended the grant making for 2021. And this impact will be much longer, especially for the art learning grants that mostly involve individual artists. Second, how can the individual artists get help during the challenging time? I mean, again, we appreciate for the Springboard for the art, for example, for launching the emergency fund. And I hope that there will be another emergency fund from Minnesota State Art Board or other funders. If so, how can we make sure it will reach out the large number of Minnesota artists? And we would like to have a clear, simple, accessible, and inclusive, and still so high artistic quality. And after all, legacy fund is money from taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up would be Roger Towler. If we passed over anybody who didn't figure out we were calling on them yet, please just send us a message and we'll try to get you back on the list. After Roger will be Kelly Anderson from Lakeville. But right now, Roger, you're up. All right, I don't hear Roger. So next on the list would be Kelly Anderson of Lakeville. And Kelly would be followed by Rick Crossett of Peoria. Kelly or Roger, are you out there?
It looks like Kelly is not on.
All right. Rick Crossett, Peoria was next. No? Should we move on?
Yeah.
Joanne Verburg of Minneapolis.
Are you ready for me now?
Yes.
Okay. I have a couple things I wanted to mention. First, before I do, I want to thank everybody who's spoken, both the administrators who are doing a great job, thank you, and also the individual artists who have spoken in such a beautiful, articulate way about a range of problems. Patrick, always so articulate. Artists need to have a seat at the table. We're talking about problems that artists have and potential funding for the future, and who is in a better position to say what those needs are and how some of the problems can be solved. But beyond that, I think artists have a lot to say in general about public policy, and we're often sidelined in those discussions. And I would really plead with anybody in this group who might have influence to think about including artists in policy making. Second, something Kathy said about rent, and this was maybe the biggest policy proposal in my life, and I think probably everybody's, is to put a freeze on rent for as long as possible, maybe a couple years, maybe longer than that. Third, this is going to go on for a long time. We have the immediate problems, and then we have all the ripple effects from the disease, from the economic blow, etc. And I think I had a number 4 here. Let's see. Oh, yeah, the more optimistic part. We have been isolated from each other, and this funny thing has happened, which is that other parts through the internet, other parts of the globe are as accessible to us as Minnesota, where we live, where we are physically and geographically. And that's maybe one of the silver linings of this situation, this lockdown. What are the others, and how can we bring...
Sorry, Joanne. Sorry. I really appreciate your comments. And as we've been saying, please include them in the chat if there are additional points that you wanted to make. So our next speaker is Sia Sautter from St. Paul. And then following Sia will be Troy Ronrud.
Okay, ready? Yes, yes, Sautter. So I have a lot to say. There's so much I agree with people. I find myself always being a little bit different and not included in systems of support for our artists. So I've worked really hard. I am educator artist model, and found around here it's just not really possible. Either you're an artist or an educator, and those of us in between, and many of us are in between, don't know quite what to do. So it's always squeezing in where you fit in. And now with this crisis, it's, you know, it's difficult all the way around. What I have, and my concern now, is that there is a funding available for all kinds of artists, and also for artists and art institutions to work together. That's what I would like to see happen, because I think we need art from everyone who has skills to share. I have been moving more into arts and chaplaincy, so spiritual care, broad term, not dogma term. And noted that in England, I'm in a group now on Facebook in England to deal with arts and healing, and they are being funded by the National Health Services in England. And it just, when I saw that, it gave me pause. Why not here? Why can we not have a system of funding that can utilize artists to help heal the trauma of COVID, and to also help people in nursing homes and hospice care and hospitals who need the beauty and the healing and the spiritual touch that the artists bring. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sia. Up next, we have Troy Ronrud from Minneapolis. Let's see, Troy. Okay, it looks like Troy is not with us. So we have Karen Auren from Fergus Falls then. So Karen Auren from Fergus Falls is up next, and then Cheryl Blackwood from North Oaks. Okay, maybe Karen's not with us either. Is Cheryl Blackford from North Oaks with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a flaky internet connection, so you might lose me. I'm a children's writer, and a lot of my writer friends make a good deal of their income from school visits and from book festivals and book tours, and all of those things have been canceled. And librarians are not at school, so they're not buying books. So the book industry has been affected greatly. And like Patrick was just preparing to send, to fill out Arts Initiative grant, wondering, is there going to be a replacement? I understand that the funding for that will come to people next year, which doesn't help. But can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's important, it's like a sense of hope for people to know that if they get through this, there is something for them in the future too. And so I don't want to lose that opportunity for artists to have that grant next year. And so I'm wondering, what's going to happen with that? Is anything? It would be nice to have a little more information. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Our next speaker is Monica Sheets from Minneapolis, followed by Asa Hoyt from St. Paul.
Hi, and yeah, thanks for.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, Monica, can you start again?
Yeah, so thanks for letting us all talk today. I think that the problem with arts fundings that the pandemic has brought to the fore are ones that we already knew existed. Most conspicuous is the turn towards project-based funding, both for individuals and institutions, and the accompanying pressure to justify projects through metrics imposed from outside and not relevant to the work. And this is particularly, I think, an issue with the State Arts Board grants. There is a place for project-based grants, but when it becomes the default mode of supporting artistic production, it replicates the gig economy structure that leaves art workers in a precarious position and makes sustainable artistic practices a fantasy. A shift towards awards based on past bodies of work or future promise comes with its own danger of reinforcing systemic inequalities of race and gender and age, etc. I recently heard a reference to the idea of operating support, for individual artists. And while the phrase is appealing, it obscures the fact that artists are workers and that the issues we face are not unique to us as artists. Everyone needs operating support, affordable housing, things like this. In the world of politics, these things have names like a social safety net, universal basic income, rent control. Arts advocacy needs to focus not only on the needs of artists and art organizations as a narrow interest group, but they need to tie their lobbying to larger issues of equity for all people. The things that we want for artists to be able to thrive are things that we should want for all humans, and we can make our case most powerfully when we make that connection clear, that it's not just about a carve out for artists, but that we're really fighting for these things for everyone. Universal basic income is basically the thing people keep talking about, some kind of operating support that artists are getting on a monthly basis. If it's going to be equitable, it needs to go to everyone. It can't just go to like this artist that has the most exhibitions or this artist that's the most well-known. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Monica. Our next speaker is Asa Hoyt from St. Paul, followed by Kelly Anderson from Lakeville.
Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
Yes. Oh, you're muted again. Asa, unmute yourself. There we go.
All I wanted to say is I think we need to kind of reimagine our public spaces. After this is over, I think we need to create a venue that people can still interact and see artwork, but also think about how we're going to approach our food systems, our communication. And I would just point out, like in the Italian Renaissance, they started developing the plazas and the piazzas and places for people to communicate and still get together, but we can still have social distance. But you know, this is a way that we can still interact and promote artists and continue our democracy. But I think we need to, instead of trying to cram more people into these apartment complexes and driving up rent and the cost of living and everything, we need to kind of reimagine our public space. And that's all I have to say for this. Thank you. Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you, Asa. Our next speaker is Kelly Anderson from Lakeville. Okay, Kelly. I can see that you're on. Okay. We'll come back and we'll try that again. I'll hand it over to you, Drew.
Hi, sorry, my screen froze for a moment. I apologize. Up next will be Shaw Cage from Minneapolis, followed by James McDonough of St. Louis Park. Shaw?
I think she said she had to bug out.
Yeah, it looks like Shay had to leave.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Jim McDonough, and I'm an artist in St. Louis Park. I'm also the board chair of the Park Theater Company here in the park. I attended the online meeting yesterday of organizations, and it was twice as many participants as we have today. I don't know what that's a reflection of. If there are more organizations than there are artists, I wouldn't think so. But anyhow, it's just an observation. Oh, by the way, I believe James Gambone is from Orono, not Orono, Orono, Minnesota. In any event, I just received a check today in the mail for $1,200 from the federal government, which dispels the notion of that we live in a society where scarcity, things are scarce, resources are scarce. We have to compete. We don't have enough to go around. Basically, if one of the, in fact, candidates that were running for president, they did propose sending everybody a check, and it was laughed off as impossible. How things change in a matter of moments or days. The other part of this is that, yes, our vision for the future, I find it, all of us are now experts in living in a global pandemic. Anyone that says they've had experience with it is falsely misrepresenting themselves. Nobody else has ever lived through this but us. I would like to see artists focus on, I'm sitting here reflecting today, that really what's saving my bacon as an artist right now is that I have the privilege of having a patron, somebody who believes in me, trusts in me, and during hard times and good times, that patron stands by me. And that patron is not an institution. Our institutions, including our funding agencies, have shown that they are not there when we need them, that they put things out and then change the rules. But our personal relationships with patrons is essential. And I believe that as artists, we need to focus on.
Thank you very much. And remember to please keep us full of your ideas through the chat function if possible. Next up will be Alison Preus of Minneapolis, and she'll be followed by Pete Driessen, also of Minneapolis. Alison?
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, great. I had originally said I wasn't going to speak, but a couple things have come up. And I guess these questions are specifically for the moment, not things going forward as originally was asked that we speak to. One is the small business relief grants that are available. Every time I'm applying for those, it says that I need to have an employee, and I'm not able to see. Strange. I'm having some technical difficulties, so I'll back out right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I've actually had some of my own today. My screen has frozen twice, so I apologize for any of those difficulties. Up next would be Pete Driessen, and they'll be followed. We had a hand raise, and I didn't get the full name before the hand raise got frozen out. Mina Mangal, and there's a couple more syllables, and I apologize that. But Pete, you're up.
Okay, thanks everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Kathy and Drew and all the artists, administrators, and funders and advocates out there. I absolutely am so proud of Minnesota, so proud of Minnesota arts community taking this step and having this town hall. This is unprecedented in America, and I'm so proud of our legacy amendment and everyone that worked so hard 15 to 20 years ago to help put that together. So getting to the point, we're living in a new arts paradigm. With all artists and arts leaders, we need to move beyond our monoculture thinking and offer more room at the table for multicultural, multifaceted, multi-tiered models that move at multiple velocities and in multiple directions, helping multiple types of people and artists moving forward. Together we can build a new inclusive and intentional type of compassionate template that would put Minnesota first on the contemporary art map. And in terms of that, I have 10 bullet points, so if I go over, I'll put them in the chat. First of all, if there's any cash restrictions on the grants, we need to remove those. Second of all, it'd be great to remove the data requirements improve the scoring recommendations, as well as reduced requirements for reporting. That being said, a multi-tiered regranting program, not only for the emergency funds that we so desperately need in the arts, but also regranting the legacy funds directly to the artists outside of our standard peer models that we already have. Another problem is because of our Arts Council setup, we cannot work as artists outside of those restrictions based on our grants. It would be great if we could work outside of our boundaries. I'd like to work in Waseca, Winona, and Waconia, Wayzata, Warroad, and Wilmer all at the same time, and collaborate with artists from those areas all at the same time. Adaptive grants, collaborative-based project grants that would bring the plural, which is the urban and the rural, together. I think it would be very helpful and would remove a lot of the problems based in not getting grant monies to outside or interior areas that have.
Thank you. We had to cut you off, but I would encourage you to put the rest of those bullet points in the chat because I think they're very valuable. So next up is, and I apologize for missing the name because my raised hand function froze up on me. And I have Mina, M-E-G-A-L, and then a few more letters, followed by Alison Bergblom Johnson. So Mina, are you on there? And while we're waiting, I would just encourage folks to, if you really want to speak, we've got a list going, but you're welcome to raise your hand. We've got a room for a few more speakers. Mina? How about if we turn it over to Alison Bergblom Johnson? And that would be followed by Greg Mueller.
Hi, thank you, Drew. This is Alison Bergblom Johnson. I am here to advocate for artists with disabilities, of which I am one. Thank you to everyone who stopped the animations. It's making it possible for me to be here. I want to say that as artists with disabilities have gotten more attention, recognition, and support from funders and organizations in the last few years, some of that is being lost right now. We are a historically marginalized group. I think like all historically marginalized groups right now should be supported. Some of our concerns are very similar to individual artists as a whole. Others have spoken well to those. Some of our concerns are very specific to all people with disabilities. Stuff like PPE for support people, such as care attendants, stuff like not being removed from a ventilator, lacking access to one because of perceived lack of quality of life. The other thing that is very specific is supports that are offered right now and their interwoven integration into support specific for people with disabilities, such as how does COVID unemployment affect asset limits in other programs, etc. Those issues get really, really granular fast. I thank everyone for listening, and I'll put anything else in the chat.
Thank you so much, Alison. Next up is Greg Mueller, followed by Katie Kelly. I think there was one other name on the list, but it disappeared from me. I think it was a Rebecca someone, but after that we have room for a couple more. If you want to raise your hand, please let us know if you'd like to speak. Greg, are you up?
I'm up. Yeah, I'm Greg Mueller from Lutsen on the North Shore, and all of us on the North Shore appreciate everything that Drew's doing, and at ARAC in particular, and how responsive they've been. Just quickly, I was on the phone with Jack Becker at Forecast just an hour ago, and we were trying to not talk about doom and gloom so much, but the positives, and we were talking about how we are all going to re-emerge out of this, and who we can partner with as entrepreneurs, and using our entrepreneurial spirit to partner with the coffee shop that wants to reopen, the bar that wants to reopen, the restaurant, and can we as artists kind of help make that happen through our sort of creative process and partner with someone in a win-win situation, and particularly musicians who are really hurting right now because they so dependent on that live interactive ingredient. So seeking out those partners, I think is imperative. I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy to do the next couple.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Drew, and thank you to all of our speakers so far and to everybody that's contributed to our chat. If you are feeling inspired and want to say something, please raise your hand. We are keeping track of additional speakers. Our next speaker is Katie Kelly, and then followed by Rebecca Pavlenko.
I ended up putting what I was going to say in the chat, so I don't need to take time, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. So Rebecca Pavlenko.
Hi, thanks for letting me have an opportunity to speak. One of the things that's happened during this time period is we have all started meeting more online, and that's done a lot to help our environment. Pollution is down, the consumption of fossil fuels is down, and our next big crisis, which is already underway, is global climate change. So I'd like to suggest that we use some of the things we are learning during this pandemic to apply towards that, such as a lot of the meetings that were once done in person could be done online, such as meetings with grant overseers when you want someone to review your grant before you submit it. You're also invited to attend review panels when they review your grant proposal. Instead of having to show up in person to do that, those could be done online. Regional and state art councils could hold meetings online. This provides much greater access, just like the meeting today. Minneapolis Institute of Arts in their Minnesota Artist Exhibition program usually hosts an annual meeting that could also be done online, which would allow a lot more artists from around the state to attend. It would also enable us to set up creative partnerships between rural and urban artists. And I would like to challenge granting organizations, funders, art institutions, and organizations to look for ways in the future where they can do more online with Zoom meetings. And one of the things they could start with is to do teach-ins for artists on how to use Zoom more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our next speaker is Janet Preus, and then followed by Alana Olson.
Hi, Janet Preus, actually.
Preus.
But very few people pronounce that right, so don't feel too bad. This is not specifically about what we're all going through with this pandemic, but there has been conversations that involve greater Minnesota artists and people who are interested in getting more going on between both urban and rural, if I may say that. I live in both, so I can. And one of the things I've noticed, and this may be a really great opportunity for us to rethink this, is that there are opportunities for urban artists to take whatever it is they do out into smaller towns in greater Minnesota. There aren't the same kind of opportunities for those who live outstate, rural Minnesota, greater Minnesota, to bring their work into urban areas or to have any sort of collaboration. There you can, but there is no there aren't grants to do that. It's not something that seems to be encouraged. And this may be a really great time now that we are all participating online and talking to each other in this way. This may be a really great opportunity to get those kinds of collaborations going. There's a lot of good art of all kinds going on all over Minnesota. And I feel like we are isolating people by these arts councils that say you have to be, not only do you have to be from this area, you have to do whatever it is you're going to do in that area. You can't take it someplace else unless it's a grant specifically for that. But anyway, that's something I throw out there that maybe we can get a bigger conversation going about that. I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Up next is Alana Olson, and then followed by Wendy Morris.
Hi, I just wanted to voice a perspective from technicians and designers in the performing arts. I haven't heard them represented. I am super well connected to those types of people, and I happen to be the only person I know who is not unemployed or about to be furloughed that fits that job description. So we are not typically the type of people who apply for grants. And in a social distancing kind of world, I don't see a lot of opportunities for a lot of designers to participate in a Zoom type performance, possibly costume design, but certainly not lighting, not really audio techs, not really carpentry, scenery, or props. So most of my friends are looking to leave the industry entirely, that they feel forced to do so. And I just want to make sure that that perspective is heard. I'm not sure I have any solutions for that, but that is for surely a concern. And then one other thing is I'm concerned that we keep our theater strata in place, which is to say we maintain large theaters, medium theaters, and also small theaters to make sure they continue to exist. A lot of the technicians who work in one strata need the other strata to also maintain a living. So if the medium theaters all drop out, I don't know how anyone's going to make a living in that kind of a future. So that's all.
Thank you, Alana. Super important points. I really appreciate that. Our next speaker is Wendy Morris.
Thank you. CETA was the Comprehensive Employment Training Act of the 1970s, and it was accidentally the largest public funding to artists in the history of this country, much larger than WPA, but it was a loophole that enabled artists to find support and to be employed in public engagement. CETA spawned a lot of the arts organizations, which continued to be essential in the ecosystem of Minnesota's arts communities, like Forecast, who have roots back to CETA. So is there an institutional collaboration, partners who can be tracking, researching, and disseminating the opportunities that are hidden, that are emerging for artists? They may not be intended for independent artists, but they are available. And Mankwe, I just want to say I really appreciate what you said about not relying on a blueprint from a less equitable era. Just thinking, how can we sort of find, whether it's government and foundations, as they're pivoting their funding streams, what are the hidden streams that are opening up that could be a source of creative engagement and creative employment and opportunity? Because this pandemic is not an isolated occurrence. Our future is going to be characterized by exponential change that's rapid, disruptive, complex, and unpredictable. That future is now. Artists are about imagination. How do we get artists into roles where we can support collective imagination that embraces this disruption as an opportunity to set conditions for a more thriving and equitable future? Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And I will turn it over to Drew.
Thank you, Kathy. Now we'd like to give all of our co-sponsors of this session just a very quick few seconds to say thank you and just introduce themselves. And we'll start with the Minnesota Theater Alliance.
Thanks, Drew. Hi, everybody. I'm Joanna Schnedler. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Theater Alliance, and I am speaking to you today from Richfield. I am inspired by the amazing artists that are all across the state, and I thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today. The Theater Alliance supports the statewide performing arts community of organizations and practitioners. And we know that it's a vibrant and complex ecosystem. And my heart breaks at the stories that people are experiencing. And so I thank you so much for sharing them and for sharing everything in the chat and engaging with us today.
Thank you. Minnesota State Arts Board.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sue Jens, and I am in St. Paul. I just wanted to thank everybody also who has been participating today, both the speakers and those who are online. I can't see the chat because I'm on the phone, but I'll look forward to reading those comments. We know that the fundamental work of the arts is to connect and to bring people together, and right now the coronavirus is really upending that work in really profound and unimaginable ways. And we know that change that a number of you have talked about is going to happen long into the future. So thank you for your creative ideas about pivoting and adapting and thinking about ways to keep Minnesotans connected with your work and with the work of other artists and arts organizations and with one another now during the pandemic and long after that. So we really appreciate everything you're doing and look forward to being as supportive as we can through this process and into the future.
Thank you, Sue. Up next, Minnesota Citizens for the Arts.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing all of your ideas and your passion. This is a weird time for everyone. We're all stuck in our houses. MCA has a staff of 2. We're trying to influence what's going on at the legislature, where the legislature is not meeting in person. Everything about our situation is weird and not likely to get better soon. You all are, the core of the arts community. You have important voices, and I'm really glad for the partnership that made this town hall possible. And if you don't know what MCA is, Minnesota Citizens for the Arts lobbies the legislature and Congress on behalf of the arts to get as much money as possible out of the state system so we can get it to the State Arts Board and Regional Arts Council so they can get it out to the field. So we're not a grant maker. We're sort of over there trying to get the money over to you, basically. The COVID crisis is making the state budget collapse. They're spending millions and millions on supporting hospitals, trying to keep people from dying. They're watching the collapse of the economy and knowing that the collapse in the economy means that the state budget is also going to have a huge crisis next year. That means that when we go back for the next round of state funding, whether it's in a special session this summer or fall or next January, we're going to have to fight like hell to keep the arts funding that we have now. I think it'll probably go down. The question is, what work can we do to keep it from going down further? So my commitment to you is that when we get to that point, I'll make sure you know what's going on at the legislature and what we're able to fight for and who's in charge and when and how to talk to those folks to see if we can get as much money as possible out of the legislature. My hope is that this crisis ends soon and we are looking at recovery and figuring out what happens next as soon as possible. And thank you again.
Thank you, Sheila. Up next is the Minnesota Presenters Network.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Blake Potoff, and I'm the Executive Director at the Fairmont Opera House and the current chair of the Minnesota Presenters Network. It's so wonderful to see and hear from everybody. I really enjoy these conversations and this time spent together. And I'm really looking forward to staying connected with all of you. Minnesota Presenters Network is not just for presenting organizations. We also have artist affiliates. So I'm very concerned for all of you and thinking of all of you because we need each other. And we have this beautiful symbiotic relationship that we cannot accomplish on our own. So if you have anything or any needs that I can help you out with, if you need an ear to listen, please, please, please reach out and I will listen. I promise you that, and help you however I can. So I'm sending virtual hugs to everybody. I love you all. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and all the wonderful, wonderful things that you give to the citizens of our state. I love you all, and we'll see you and talk to you very, very soon.
Thank you, Blake. Next up, we have Arts Midwest, but they may have had to take off quickly. So Arts Midwest, did we able to stick on the call?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great.
Hi, everybody. This is Adam Perry. I am Vice President for Strategy and Programs at Arts Midwest. Thank you all for your time today. It was really important to hear you. We are a regional arts organization based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that serves 9 states from North Dakota all the way to Ohio. But Minnesota is near and dear to our heart in that we're based here and we're all from here, and it's our economy. I've been a part of this creative economy here in Minnesota for over 20 years, and I'm particularly moved in this moment by what is happening to everybody. And you should know that Arts Midwest is a re-grantor and a facilitator, a gatherer, a creator, and an investor. And we are paying attention to everything you say right now as we pivot toward the new future and think about our new programs and the way we're going to be showing up in the world. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next up is the City of Minneapolis Office of Art, Culture, and the Creative Economy.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Hi, this is Gillian Kame. I'm the Director of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. And I want to echo what everyone else has already said. It's been inspiring. While this time is challenging, it's also been really inspiring to rethink the systems that are currently not serving us and to hear your voices. For those who don't know about my office, I'm inside of City Hall in Minneapolis. And the work we do is to commission artists, collaborate with artists, provide artist residencies, do research on the creative ecology, develop policies that assist artists, provide technical assistance and training. We've worked closely with organizations like Springboard and MRAC to try to get some resources out to you while we try to figure out what to do next. So this is really important to me, and to hear what you all have to say. I want to say hi to Mankwe and Wendy especially, but also let you know that I've heard on the chat and also folks talk about a WTPA and a CETA type initiative, and that my colleagues in other cities are poking around at that. We're looking for those cracks where we can bring other than arts funding to the work of artists. And I know there's a national dialogue developing around that, and I'm really, really hopeful about it and excited. So hopefully, once we can identify what those funding streams look like, we can come back and share those ideas and look for folks who are interested in talking more about it. I will share my email in the chat with everyone. Don't hesitate to reach out. I have regular community office hours on Friday mornings. I'm more than happy to just sit and chat or try to solve a problem if I can. I can point you in the right direction if you're experiencing any difficulties with accessing funds. So I'm going to say that and see you out when we're all out. Bye.
Thank you very much. Up next, we have Springboard for the Arts.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Zabel. I'm from Springboard for the Arts, and I just want to echo what everyone else has said. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas and your stories and your grief and your pain and your hope and your optimism. I feel all those things on a daily basis, as I'm sure many of you do too. And I just want to also add that Springboard is really committed to continuing this conversation. We don't want this one time to be a single event. We believe that individual artists are their best own advocates, and that any systems or changes to the system that impact artists should be done in concert with and with the influence and the advice and the great ideas of individual artists themselves. I want to just point to a couple practical resources in case you don't already know. Springboard does have an emergency relief fund. If you haven't applied yet, please still apply. We're committed and continuing to fundraise for that fund so that we can keep supporting artists in that stopgap way. At the same time, we are also very clear that emergency funding is a stopgap, and that's all it is. It's not a system, and it's not gonna fix this for anyone. There are other resources on our website. In particular, I know many of you had questions about unemployment. There's my colleague Andy Sturdamont put together a really excellent frequently asked questions about unemployment in Minnesota that's on Springboard's website. And we also have folks on staff and other artist career coaches and consultants who can work with you around questions around unemployment, business model changes, all of the kind of practicalities and nuts and bolts, or if you just need someone to talk to about how your work is going and kind of bounce ideas around with. As many of you said, this situation has exposed and illuminated inequities in our system and places where we simply lack a system for artists and for lots of other people too. I have to believe that this moment can also be an opportunity to address those things and to imagine and build a better future and more equitable, more equal systems that actually value labor in new ways, particularly the labor of artists and creative workers and culture bearers in our state and in our country. One of the most hopeful things that's happened for me in the last 6 weeks is that we've been able to organize about 80 different groups across the country who are all running emergency relief funds and help them share ideas and connect to each other. And there's something to me that it feels like a kernel of a system there that we've never had in this country before. And so we're really committed to trying to work on that and support that network of people, both locally and nationally, so that we come out of this with better resources, better supports, and with an increased sense of public value for the work and the commitment and the vision that artists bring to our communities every day, because we're going to need artists to build our way out of this and to imagine our way out of this. I'm just incredibly grateful to all of you for spending this precious, precious, beautiful afternoon staring at another Zoom screen and contributing your ideas and connecting with each other. If you have ideas right away, please reach out to us at Springboard or anyone else who was a host for this call, and you have our commitment that this is not the end of the conversation, but just the beginning. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy for our final words. Kathy?
Yeah, so I'll just ditto everybody also. But in addition to that, so on behalf of the Forum of Regional Arts Councils of Minnesota, which is made up of the 11 regional arts councils throughout Minnesota, we help to distribute the state funds and try to get them into all of the arts organizations and arts workers throughout the state. We want to thank you for joining us today. And like Laura said, you could have been anywhere else outside, at least sitting in the sun. So thank you for joining us, and thank you to all the speakers that prepared to share your ideas with us, or that felt inspired during the session to raise your hands and speak. This really does feel like an extraordinary time for solidarity across the state. There are so many of you that joined us today that I've never met before, or that I did not know about. And so I think that there are absolutely opportunities for us to be thinking differently about the Minnesota arts and cultural community and how we can come together and be strong. This is also a time of crisis, and so let's not waste it. Let's not waste this time of crisis. Let's really dream about the possibilities to do things differently. There are so many things that people said today that has really inspired me, and I know I'm sure has inspired everybody here. We will be following up with an email that will have the contact information of all the sponsors that put this event together. I don't imagine this is going to be the last one. I would love to connect with every single one of you again. Whether you are in my region or not, I would love to hear about what you're doing. Please feel free to reach out to us directly, and enjoy the rest of your day. That concludes our town hall for today.